I'm Joshua Davidson, Senior Rabbi of Temple Emanu-El, and on behalf of our Streicker Cultural Center and its director, Dr. Gadi Levy, I'm honored to welcome you, both in person and I know a great many virtually, to tonight's conversation with Ted Deutch, CEO of the American Jewish Committee. In 2019, AJC began its annual surveys on the state of anti-Semitism in America. Surveys many of us, I suspect, did not take seriously enough at the time. Yes, we flinched at reports of swastikas on graves or synagogue doors. We were outraged at attacks on Hasidim in Brooklyn. But too often we dismissed these attacks as isolated acts by a few haters, as if each weren't a serious hate crime deserving of our focus. The murders at synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway shocked us into action. We increased our institutional security posture. But though we were infuriated by the additional expense Jewish institutions were incurring to ensure our safety, soon our level of fear began to recede, not to where it had been, but to a new normal. But after the earthquake of October 7th, 2023, the landscape shifted. With crowds chanting, "Hitler was right," Jewish students fleeing for safety, and even peaceful hostage vigils attacked, we knew we had entered a new period of American Jewish history. Whether from the right or the left, more than a third of Jewish Americans reported being personally targeted, and 3/4 said they felt increasingly unsafe, and those are now old numbers. Tonight, as AJC releases its 2025 survey, Ted Deutch joins us to give us the new numbers, to map the global landscape of anti-Semitism, to examine its link to social media, and to reflect on why confronting it must rise above partisanship. Ted became CEO of AJC in 2022, after 12 years in the United States House of Representatives, where he chaired the House Ethics Committee, led key foreign affairs subcommittees, and founded the bipartisan task force for combating anti-Semitism. Many of you will have questions I know you'd like to ask of him. We hope you'll note them on the index cards we'll pass around, and that you'll then pass those cards to our staff members, and we'll get to as many of them as we can on topics we haven't already addressed. And if you're joining us virtually, you can email your questions to the address we provided. Now, it is my privilege to welcome to our stage the Honorable Ted Deutch.
Thanks, Rabbi. Hi, everyone.
Thank you, Ted. It's an honor to sit with you, and as I think many folks know, Emanu-El and AJC share a history in our connection back to Louis Marshall, who presided over both institutions at the same time. And to this day, many of our members, old and young, many participating in the LIFT program, are part of AJC's efforts. So it is a real honor to have you here tonight, so I thank you.
Thank you.
Before we get to the matter at hand, AJC's report, I wanted to give you, Ted, an opportunity to speak to what I know many in our community are thinking about right now, and that is the role of fighting anti-Semitism versus the importance of investing in Jewish life, and ultimately the role organizations like AJC play in meeting this moment for the Jewish community. You know, recently, Bret Stephens delivered a major and very thoughtful address on the state of world Jewry. And one of Bret's arguments was that the most effective response to anti-Semitism is not to be found in advocacy campaigns or public policy, but in constructing a thriving Jewish life, investing in Jewish education, Jewish culture, and Jewish identity-building initiatives. And I certainly agree that our own best psychological response to anti-Semitism is that full-hearted embrace of Jewish life. But in the conversation following his address, he went on to say that supporting organizations like the Anti-Defamation League are actually poor investments. In a similar vein, many have criticized Robert Kraft's Super Bowl ad campaign against anti-Semitism in schools as antiquated and misdirected. How do you respond to such critiques? Can we survive without organizations like yours, the ADL, the Blue Square Alliance, standing on the ramparts and calling out anti-Semitism when we see it?
That's it? First, Rabbi, thank you very much. Thanks for hosting. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks for all who are watching the live stream. I'm grateful to you and the entire Streicker team. So it will not surprise you to learn this question has come up a lot since Brett delivered his remarks. And I'd make a few observations. I have spent decades of my life in public service, first in Congress and now leading AJC. And what you learn very quickly in this work is that you don't change reality by withdrawing. You change reality by showing up. That's the important part of this conversation that I feel is missing. Brett is a friend of mine. He is a friend of AJC's. He is incredibly thoughtful and influential, both as an American journalist and as a proud Jew. And he is absolutely correct. I think it's important to point out, absolutely correct. There's no single magic bullet in the fight against anti-Semitism. And I agree completely that we should be investing more in Jewish pride and Jewish education. At AJC, this is a fundamental part of what we do. All the work we do as proud American Jews. We are the American Jewish Committee. Also, this is the work we do, and there's so many in this room and so many are watching whose kids have gone through our Leaders for Tomorrow program to actually help them become better, more knowledgeable, stronger Jewish leaders, whose kids may have participated in our Campus Global Board or came to work at AJC on a Goldman Fellowship, on an internship during college, or whose young adult kids are currently part of our Access Global program. This is hugely important. He is absolutely right. But here's the thing about all of this. The idea that we should focus inward alone in the fight against, instead of fighting anti-Semitism, I think gets it backward. It is not either or. It is both and. That's the approach that we have to take here. We invest in, and it's important to remember this. Why do we invest in Jewish education? Why is it such a priority? Well, we invest in Jewish education so our children know who they are. And we fight anti-Semitism so that they can live that identity proudly and boldly and openly and safely as Jews. That's why this work matters so much. We hear a lot, and especially this week again, the question of we need more joy, less oi, more joy in what we do in our community. And I think that's not wrong. Joy is the goal. But advocacy, the work that we do, is the path to help achieve it. That's why we released the source study. I'll make a few observations and then we can get on with the conversation. 91% of Jews in America feel that they are less safe in America because of the events that we've seen happen over the past year, because of the attack, the firebombing of the governor's mansion in Philadelphia, because of the attacks in Boulder, Colorado, and certainly for all of us at AJC, especially because of the horrific murders of Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky in Washington, D.C., outside of an AJC event. So that's not a question of being uncomfortable or uneasy. It's that they're less safe. That's what we're responding to. That's how people feel. 55% of American Jews, more than half, almost 60% of American Jews, changed their behavior over the past year because of anti-Semitism. That is, they think twice about what they say or what they wear or how they identify or where they go or what they post online. Again, this is the fact that they're thinking twice about who they are is why we have such an important role to play, because we can't accept that as normal. And finally, almost a third of American Jews said they were personally targeted by anti-Semitism. That's not an abstract trend. That is our friends and our neighbors and our relatives. Joy doesn't sustain itself. It requires action. And I hear people say, we should just focus on Jewish identity, we should build schools we can turn inward. We can't rely on only ourselves. We're 2% of the American population, 2%. We have been at the forefront of every great social movement in America, particularly when groups found themselves at risk. We cannot afford, for the first time, to withdraw from that leadership role when the community that is the most at risk is our own. That's why this work matters so much. Our community has always worked to engage with the outside world, to form alliances, to work with leaders. We work with leaders in government and the private sector, in education and in civil society, because only by working together with them will we be able to keep the Jewish community safe so that we have the opportunity to really grow and thrive. We never retreated from the world. That's not what we do. We help to shape the world. That's the way we have to approach this. And finally, Rabbi, since you mentioned the Blue Square campaign, I would just comment. I would comment this. As we continue to do this work in New York, every college and university now has to have a Title VI coordinator because we engage. Because at AJC, this is what we do. And because of AJC, because of the work that we do, TikTok now has someone whose focus is on fighting anti-Semitism in an environment that is wholly unsafe for Jews that we need to change. We can go on and on with that work. But we're aware of it. When there is an effort made to help raise awareness of this issue, I think we have to have this conversation and take it seriously, and I'd make 2 points. Number one, no one is trying to convince the anti-Semites that they shouldn't be anti-Semites. We're trying to convince the rest of the world, both the leaders that AJC works with and the general public that Blue Square Alliance was targeting. We're trying to convince them that anti-Semites are dangerous to the Jewish community and to America at large. And number two, as to the cost, because I hear a lot, and I'll finish with this. I hear a lot about, well, what could we have done with $15 million that was spent on that commercial? And I would respectfully just point out that how we devote our resources is always an important question. And I could point to Jewish names on buildings and campuses and hospitals and opera houses and libraries around the country and ask the same question. There are resources available. We have to prioritize, and we have to recognize that the Jewish community always has played a leadership role in pushing back when there are challenges. The challenges right now are to our community, and everything that we can do to help make the world aware of it, we should be doing. And who benefits is the last point I'll make. Who benefits most? Who has enjoyed the vicious attacks that have taken place in this debate about the Super Bowl ad? Who benefits most from the Jewish community being so divided and often vitriolic in the way this debate has taken place? Our enemies. We have to stand together in this battle, and we have to do it both by helping to raise a generation of strong Jewish leaders, by helping everyone in the community become better educated, and by working to engage across the country and around the world, as AJC does, to help shape a future in which Jews and Israel can thrive.
Beautifully said. So you've been AJC's CEO a little more than 3 years, coming from Congress, where politics have only become more partisan and more divisive. How have you been positioning AJC to pursue its mission on behalf of the Jewish people amidst this extraordinary polarization?
Well, everyone understands, everyone here understands, but it's really worth emphasizing, especially in light of the increased polarization, in light of the way that so many in society retreat to camps rather than standing together to confront the challenges that we have, that AJC is not only nonpartisan, but at a time when I would submit there are fewer and fewer examples of places where we can come together, both Republicans and Democrats, regardless of who you supported in whatever race. And we have, at AJC, I tell people all the time, we have among our AJC activists, we have some really active Republicans who care a lot about partisan politics as Republicans. And we have some very active Democrats who likewise are very involved in democratic politics. And look, I think it's important for Jews to find ways to be involved, but that's not what we do. And when people come to AJC, they understand that all of that remains on the outside. That when we come together, when we go to talk to elected officials, when we're on Capitol Hill, when we're meeting with administration officials in the Trump administration, when we're meeting with leaders around the world, it doesn't matter what party they're from. The work that we do is to create a world where Jews and Israel thrive, period. And to offer that to people, to be able to come work with us, to commit to this work in this really divided world has never been more important than ever. And I can tell you, as someone who spent a long time, as I think back, the time I spent in politics grows longer and longer. I can tell you that having a trusted resource, whether you're an administration official serving in the State Department, or you're a member of Congress or their staff, or a senator or a committee leader, in each of those instances, knowing that you have an organization to work with whose goals are out in front, and recognize that we can't choose which anti-Semitism we're fighting against. We fight against all of it. And we're willing to work with anyone, and anyone who is joining this fight with us, we want to help them succeed. Having that kind of resource available is vitally important. That's the work that we provide. And the partisanship that we see around the country and around the world is troubling. Having a place where people can come and work together, all of us rowing in the same direction, all of us committed to the same thing, all of us understanding that if we fight anti-Semitism and the Jewish community is protected, and we stand against those, whatever party they're in, who attack us, we're not just protecting the Jewish community, we are protecting society and democracy as a whole.
I want to follow up on that just a little bit. We often speak of anti-Semitism in the singular, but many argue we should be speaking of anti-Semitisms in the plural. The hate of the white supremacists is not necessarily to be conflated with demonization of Israel. So what are the differences and similarities in the threats of anti-Semitisms coming from the right and the left, and do they require different approaches to counter them, or are they more alike than we realize? And just to follow up on, given that anti-Semitic tropes have become too common on the edges, but not just the edges of both the Republican and the Democratic parties, how do we work with those parties to fight it?
Well, your last point is really important, which is we've seen this increase on the far right and the far left in both parties. And we have seen those extremes use anti-Semitism for political gain. And are they the same? Yes and no. I mean, fundamentally, anti-Semitism is a conspiracy theory, and it's a hatred. Look, we were hated as Jews because of our religion. And if we go back to the origins, right? We were hated because of the lies that Jews killed Christ, and that the blood libel, that Jews used the blood of babies to make matzah, and that Jews were ultimately responsible, the Jewish religion was responsible for all of the ills in the world. And then there was a transition, and it was Jews as a race. And it was because of Jews that the Nazis used Judaism as a race to say that the purity of the Aryan race was being despoiled because of the Jewish race, and thus the attempted annihilation of global Jewry, again with so many of the same conspiracy theories about the Jews and the role that Jews play in the world. And you fast forward to where we are today, and we're now in this whole new stage where we continue to have the conspiracy-based anti-Semitism that we see particularly on the far right. If you look at the things that are said on a regular basis by Candace Owens, the conspiracy theories from her, from Tucker Carlson, from so many others on social media who platform these conspiracy theories. And then on the far left, you now have simply gone from the attacks against Jews as a religion, attacks against Jews as a race, and now attacks against Jews because of our homeland. And all of those things that had been said about Jews are now being said about Israel, which then, particularly on the far left, which then translates into attacks on us. So if Israel is, as the anti-Semites on the left argue, if Israel is committing genocide, a scurrilous lie, if Israel is indiscriminately killing babies, all of the worst things that we've heard on the anti-Zionist left, well, then anyone who supports Israel, that would be the Jewish community and all Zionists, then become part of that. It's the newest iteration of anti-Semitism. How do we fight it? Well, yes, it's different in each. It starts with being clear that whether it comes from the far left, from the far right, whether it comes from radical Islamists, whether it comes from those who platform Holocaust deniers, in every instance, we have to call out the lies. We have to make clear that using that language and spending time associating yourself with those kinds of anti-Semites can't be seen as beneficial in politics. We've said, I'll finish with this, Rabbi, for the longest time, every other group, when it comes to politics, has been clear that there are certain expectations that they have. And when it comes to people who are running for office, in the Jewish community, for the longest time, we took for granted that people who were running for office weren't anti-Semites. We took for granted that we could focus on support for Israel, but the Jewish community ultimately was going to remain safe because obviously everyone stands for that premise. And what we've learned, particularly since October 7th, is we can't just accept that that's necessarily true. We have to press our leaders to make sure that they are standing up and speaking out against anti-Semitism. This is what we tell political leaders, and this is what we tell business leaders, it's what we tell education leaders. When you speak with moral clarity, when you display the kind of leadership that sets forth the difference between right and wrong, and what it means when you stand with in the case of Israel, with the one democracy in the region that faced this horrific attack against by Hamas on October 7th, and you're not standing with the sympathizers and supporters of the Hamas terrorists who carried out that attack, that sets a tone. And leadership sets a tone for the institutions in which they lead, we have always continued to press, and especially since October 7th, to press them to make sure they're speaking with that clarity.
So to this point, many in the New York City Jewish community are apprehensive about Mayor Mamdani because of his position on Israel and are concerned about how he may respond to anti-Semitism and the needs of the Jewish community here. I think it's fair to say he got off to a pretty shaky start with the event outside Park East Synagogue, after which his team put out a weak statement essentially blaming the victim, followed by his repeal of the executive order adopting the stronger IRA definition of anti-Semitism. But I also think it's fair to say that he's done a bit better of late, calling Hamas what it is, a terrorist organization, and condemning classic right-wing anti-Semitism when it has all too frequently occurred. Of course, we in the leadership of the Jewish community continue to impress upon him the impact of anti-Israel rhetoric on the safety of our community. If you were to advise him on the matter of Jewish security, what would you say to him?
Well, first of all, the Park East example is a good one. There has to be an acknowledgement that that anti-Semitism puts Jews at risk, and that choosing which type of anti-Semitism you're going to object to doesn't sufficiently protect the Jewish community. So in that example, when there was a gathering of nefesh b'nefesh, when people were coming together to help others who simply were committing the crime of wanting to make aliyah, that the protesters outside calling for murder of IDF soldiers, it's fine to condemn that, and that was the right thing for the mayor to do. To then turn around and suggest that somehow the people inside were violating international law upends the very stance that he took with regard to what was happening outside. There has to be consistency in the way that you approach these issues. And there are all kinds of things that the mayor can do. There are the very straightforward ones of putting to rest some of the concerns that the community has about statements he's made about BDS and about how he would treat Israelis and the prime minister coming to New York City. One way I would suggest that the mayor might show goodwill here is coming up. He's the mayor of the city in which the United Nations is based. Well, as we've seen over the past couple of days, when first the foreign minister of Iran announces that he intends to come speak to the Human Rights Council, the foreign minister of Iran, whose government and IRGC just slaughtered tens of thousands of protesters for the crime of protesting for better conditions for their lives and more freedom, for that foreign minister to announce that he's coming to speak to the Human Rights Council makes a mockery of the Human Rights Council, if it's possible to make more of a mockery of the Human Rights Council, and I think gives the mayor of New York City the opportunity to simply acknowledge as much and to call out the Human Rights Council for certainly this Human Rights Council that's been obsessed with Israel above all else and demonizing Israel. Here's an opportunity to make clear that in this case, he's going to stand with those protesters of Iran in ways that our own community would appreciate. Secondly, again, the United Nations is here. Francesca Albanese, the special rapporteur, just this week in Doha at an Al Jazeera conference in which, first of all, a conference in Doha hosted by Al Jazeera, a television station that continues to spread anti-Israel, anti-Semitic rhetoric. Al Jazeera and Doha hosted and platformed the head of Hamas. And at the same conference, Francesca Albanese chose to make clear that everything we knew about her, the statements that she's made trying to justify what happened on October 7th and the slaughter of Israelis by Hamas, the lies about how Israel responded, the lies about the number of people that died in the war, that she went all the way and carried that out on the stage in saying that humanity now has a shared enemy in Israel. Again, it would be, I think, not unreasonable to think that the mayor of New York City, who speaks constantly about human rights, even as he denigrates the state of Israel, to actually speak out against this horrific language that violates human rights itself, and to make clear that this kind of language shouldn't be tolerated. Language matters. It's the reason why we've spoken out consistently about the mayor's refusal to condemn globalizing the Intifada. It's the reason why the kind of things that are the casual references to Israel committing genocide, language that actually puts people at risk, we've condemned. Here's an opportunity, again, not directly about Israel, but here's an opportunity for the mayor to at least show that there's some understanding that there are lines that go too far. From there, we will continue to push to make sure that he understands that the anti-Israel positions that are espoused are positions that put Jewish New Yorkers at risk, and we will continue to stand against those.
Thank you. Let's stay with Iran, because you've been engaged with Iran back to your days as a state senator in Florida, when you first introduced and passed the nation's first law mandating that public pension funds not be used to advance Iran's quest for nuclear weapons. And you, of course, continued your efforts during your tenure in Congress. Now, as you've noted, we've seen how the regime has slaughtered tens of thousands of protesters, and, of course, in recent days, we've seen tensions rise with regard to the U.S. and Iran, with Israel's own interests certainly at play. Bibi Netanyahu was in Washington today. What are you looking at now when it comes to Iran? What happens next? And what is AJC's role in any sort of advocacy?
Sure, thanks. Well, first of all, I can tell you what we've been doing. After the attack against the protesters, we again moved, as we have successfully in many countries, but we organized all of our efforts across Europe to really focus on the threat that the IRGC poses and the need for the EU to designate the IRGC a terrorist organization, which finally happened. So it was a significant step. This is the kind of advocacy that we engage in around the world. It was particularly important in Europe. But there is more to that. I'm taking a delegation to the Munich Security Conference tomorrow. And this is a gathering of national defense officials and leaders from across the world that meets every year. And we'll have, while we're in Munich, we'll have dozens of meetings with world leaders. And we'll advocate for the relationship between their country and Israel. We will speak up about the Jewish communities in their countries, so many of whom, in now more than 40 countries, we have active agreements that we work with those Jewish communities and on behalf of those Jewish communities. So we'll advocate for them. But on Iran, we'll continue to press all of them, as we always do, but as is especially the case now, to offer their support for the protesters, to make sure that more needs to be done when it comes to the actions taken by the Iranian government. How is it that there's been no price to pay for diplomats, Iranian diplomats around the world? How is it that after this slaughter of protesters, that things have seemed to carry on as normal? There are more actions that governments can take. We will be advocating for tougher actions when we meet with these leaders from across Europe and around the world. And then finally, when it comes to what may happen next, In Iran, look, the United States is engaged in these deliberations with Iran over all of the challenges that they pose. The Secretary of State, and we were grateful for this, and we've been urging the administration to be clear about it. Secretary Rubio last week made clear that any agreement with Iran has to be about more than just the nuclear program, but it has to deal with ballistic missiles. It has to deal with their treatment of protesters and the way it treats its own citizens, the ongoing violations of human rights, and it has to address the export of terror that Iran has supported and conducted all around the world. Speaking with that kind of clarity is really important. The Iranian response is, no, they have a right to build ballistic missiles, and they don't intend to hold these discussions. For us, what we'll be doing in these meetings in Munich, just as we've been doing with our diplomatic meetings at the consulates around the United States, just as we're doing in our conversations on Capitol Hill, is to make sure that leaders understand that these debates that are taking place, these negotiations that are taking place, have multiple pieces, and that we cannot allow ourselves to be fooled by the Iranians into thinking that somehow, if they drag this out long enough, if they say that eventually they're going to provide some access to their nuclear sites, that's going to address any of the other bad behavior or the way they treat their protesters. Keeping all of this front and center helps to ensure that it remains front and center in the deliberations with the United States. And if those break down, and if ultimately there is a decision made by the United States to act, then we want the world and all of the leadership that we deal with to understand what's at risk if Iran is allowed to continue to build out their nuclear program, to have a ballistic missile program unfettered that puts at risk Israel and all of the countries within reach. And finally, the threat that Iran poses to Jewish communities across Europe, in Latin America, and here in the United States as well.
I want to stay with AJC's extraordinary diplomatic work for a moment, because there's no organization on the global Jewish landscape that engages in the sort of diplomatic work that the American Jewish Committee does. During the course of the years that hostages were in Gaza, AJC coordinated over 600 meetings with government officials to ensure that the plight of the hostages remained front and center. Now that the hostages have been returned, where do you see AJC's advocacy focused right now?
Sure. First of all, I was fortunate enough to be in Israel. I went to Israel for the president's speech to the Knesset, and was there when when the remaining living hostages were released, which was a remarkable feeling, given how closely we all held the hostages to our own hearts. At AJC, we, over the course of more than 2 years, we took hostage families and then returned hostages to over 600 meetings with government officials, leaders in Congress and all around the world. It was such a relief for the living hostages to come home, and an incredible feeling to know that all of the hostages have now been returned. I was cleaning out my desk in the office today, and I had I think probably a lot of you can relate to this, I had a little tray full of yellow pins. And it was a really moving moment to think that I don't need to dip into that. And so now we can think about what comes next. So our diplomacy going forward is focused on the work we do through our Center for a New Middle East. It's working to ensure that the Abraham Accords remains strong, and that there are opportunities through civil society engagement, through business, and through the government, the diplomatic work that we do, to strengthen those ties between the Abraham Accords countries, to make sure that there are more opportunities to build out closer relationships across the region. and then to build it out further around the world. One of the things we've really been focused on is the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC. We work closely through our representative in India with the Indian government on this effort that will run from India through the Middle East, through Saudi Arabia, Israel, on into Europe, Greece and Cyprus being the first point. And so when we were in Washington last week, we met with senior officials from Greece and from Cyprus. We've had meetings with the Saudis. The Israelis, obviously central to all of this. This would be transformative for the region. And so we continue to work using all of those relationships that we have. There's a special representative focused on this issue from Greece. There's a special representative focused on this issue for the EU. We'll have those meetings when we're in Munich. Making sure that we continue to forge ahead is important there. We're really focused, in addition to all of this, we're really focused as well on the opportunities for Israel to normalize, to become more fully integrated into the region. So whether it's Saudi Arabia or the other countries in the region, we think this is a huge opportunity for the future. And then finally, we don't take for granted the fact that there is continued engagement by the administration at the highest levels on what comes next in Gaza. And making sure that, on the one hand, the world understands that there is no peaceful Gaza that continues if Hamas is allowed to retain their weapons. They have to be disarmed. At the same time, there are countries who are interested, countries that we work with on a regular basis, who are interested in doing more, who are interested in engaging because they understand the prospect for peace that will come if Hamas is disarmed and plays no role in Gaza, and the efforts to move forward can really lead to a lasting peace.
So part of the track toward normalization with Saudi Arabia, at least as we've been led to understand, is some viable path toward an agreement with the Palestinians. The current Israeli government doesn't always seem to prioritize that. In the last week, Israel's Security Cabinet took actions that would seem to consolidate Israel's power in the West Bank. How do you, as a diplomat who's seeking to advance the cause of Israel's integration in a broader Middle East, the normalization of which you spoke, how do you respond when perhaps Israel's government takes steps that might create obstacles toward that broader goal?
Well, it's an important question. We take seriously the work that we do engaging with countries throughout the region and around the world. And so we first, I think it's especially important for us to always make clear that we're not going to allow any efforts on the part of those who seek to undermine not just support for Israel around the world, but seek to undermine Israel's existence, that we're not going to allow those who are critical of policies of the Israeli government to suggest that, and therefore Israel itself, as the homeland of the Jewish people, as a Jewish and democratic state, has no right to exist. We have seen this effort throughout, especially since October 7th. We continue to fight against it. That is always point number one, often having to remind people why we're at this position, the position that we're in now, what happened on October 7th, the threats that Israel's continue to face. We also have been clear, as we were after that action by the Security Cabinet, that any unilateral action that's taken that potentially puts at risk the possibility of further integration of Israel into the region is something that we're going to be critical of. We think that it's important as Israel and the countries in the region seek to strengthen the Abraham Accords, that we're also always mindful of of what the potential future can look like, and that the countries act in a way that always is considering where things can lead. We've been very clear. There are the number of things that when we talk about a political horizon for the Palestinians, something that the Saudis always talk about. I mean, there are all kinds of things that have to happen, starting with the Palestinians acknowledging, and those countries who have been trying to criticize Israel, acknowledging that Israel's not going anywhere. The modern state of Israel is the homeland for the Jewish people. It is not going anywhere. That's number one. And once that's understood, and then there are a whole series of actions that have to be taken to de-radicalize and to make sure that we find ourselves on a path that can lead to peace. This may take years, but keeping that in mind and the possibility of moving that direction is critical.
Okay. I want to ask you one more question about AJC's work, and then we're going to go to questions from the audience. So AJC does this extraordinary work on a global scale, but you should also know that AJC does extraordinary work on a very local scale, and I've actually been involved in it, working with Laura Shaw-Frank and Ira Glasser from your office here with New York City's private schools, who many of which struggled after October 7th. We also know that at the university level, Jewish students have been subjected to a degree of hate that we couldn't have even imagined. How is AJC working with K-12 and university leadership, as well as students themselves, to ensure that Jewish students can learn and grow in safe environments?
Well, first of all, we appreciate the partnership, and we thank you for your leadership in those efforts with us, and for playing a critical role, especially with those high school heads of school. Our Center for Education Advocacy is focused on creating environments not only in which Jews are safe, but as we do that, we're creating a culture in which everyone is welcome. This is the way we go about our work. We do it in the K-12 space, both with independent schools, where we work very closely with the heads of independent schools to help address anti-Semitism when it comes up, to make sure that we're working with the heads of school, with parents in the school, with students in the school, so that any challenges that exist to the Jewish community can be addressed in ways that strengthen the Jewish community, but also will strengthen the school so that we won't see those challenges again, providing trainings, providing education, providing materials. For colleges, our CEA, the center works with the presidents of universities around the country. Since October 7th, first we took the work we were already doing and working with universities to keep Jewish students safe. We provided materials to revise and clarify codes of student conduct to make sure that there was accountability. All of that's really important. But beyond that, we've continued to work with the presidents of major universities from around the country to help change campus culture. Addressing the problems on campus for Jewish students doesn't come with simply stopping the encampments and making it easy for students, Jewish students, to go to class again. It means acknowledging that the anti-Israel forces on campus have been at this for decades, and we do not have the liberty of simply walking away now that things are a little bit better on campus. We have to be engaged. From AJC's perspective, this is the single most important battlefront in the fight against anti-Semitism that we have in our country. It's why we do so much work with students both on campus through our Campus Global Board. I mentioned our Leaders for Tomorrow program in high school that prepares students for college. And it's why we do so much with parents through our Parent Empowerment program to help grandparents and parents become better advocates for their children and grandchildren, and teaching them how to engage. And finally, our Project Interchange program takes leaders to Israel from around the world, But what's been particularly impactful is the trips that we do every year for the heads of independent schools, for college presidents, for deans of student life, helping them understand not just the complexities of the modern state of Israel, which is critical, but also helping them understand the connection that their Jewish students, Jewish parents, Jewish supporters feel to the state of Israel. It makes it easier for us to engage with them when they're back, and we're going to continue to do these trips because it creates a whole group now, growing group of university officials and high school officials who understand that the efforts to demonize Israel aren't just wrong and misguided, but that they're dangerous, and helps them better understand what Israeli democracy looks like and why we care so deeply about our homeland.
If any of you have children or grandchildren in high school and you're looking for opportunities for them, you should take a look at the AJC's programs, at least here in New York. And every year we have 1 or 2 kids from Emanu-El who participate. All right, now I want to go to some of the group's questions. The first, in the 20th century, the American zeitgeist was defined by TV and newspapers. Today, it's social media. Does the organized Jewish community need a social media strategy?
Look, we know from our State of Antisemitism in America report that the largest challenge for us when it comes to fighting anti-Semitism is online. And there are multiple ways to address it. Yes, we need a better strategy, but there are multiple ways to address it. There is the content piece, and I think we have to acknowledge that it's important to put out meaningful content. It is also important to realize that the content is driven by algorithms that determine what it is you're going to see. And the way to address those algorithms is to deal directly with the social media companies, which is what we do. And we can point to successes with Meta and with TikTok and with others in working to ensure that anti-Semitic material and anti-Semitic material that feeds into algorithms is taken down from their sites. This is an enormous challenge that the community will be well served to come together around. Every social media company has they're private companies. They all have their own set of guidelines, but all of them are consistent in not permitting dangerous hate speech on their sites. We're not asking for any laws to be passed to outlaw speech, but it is absolutely fair for the Jewish community to expect of the social media companies and to expect of the AI companies, where over 60% of the Jewish community is concerned about potential and rising anti-Semitism in that space. We have every right to expect that these companies will act to make sure that they're following their own rules, that anti-Semitism cannot be a way that the algorithm uses to drive up viewership. That's an important statement for our community to make. This is what we do in our engagement with social media companies. It's what we think, again, the community coming together around this issue has even more power, and that's been a focus of ours, making sure that we're actually working together across the Jewish community on the best strategy, again, both on the content side, which is important now and in the long run, and especially in the expectations that we have that the social media companies, the tech companies, the AI companies are acting in a way that protects the people on those sites just as they declare they are committed to doing.
2 questions about younger American Jews. The first, what to do about Gen X, millennial, and younger Jews who have been indoctrinated by Qatari money in U.S. and European universities?
Well, if I can use this as a moment to actually say something positive, Rabbi, I want to talk about the way that we think about doing this. There are there are lots of things that have to happen, but it starts with, I would maintain, getting back to where we started our conversation, it starts with strong and resilient, knowledgeable Jewish leaders who are in the best position on those campuses to actually respond to what students who have been indoctrinated by those seeking to undermine Israel are saying. And that's the work that we do, creating the next generation of global Jewish leaders. Our LIFT program, I was just in Washington last week, and I met with 250 of the most inspirational high school students who came to our summit in Washington, who spent several days together learning with one another, strengthening one another, and becoming even better leaders with one another. And they're all going to go back to their communities. They're going to work to strengthen their high schools. And then when they get to college, the expectation is that, having built up this cohort, many of them are going to want to participate as our campus global fellows to help become better leaders on the college campuses to respond to exactly this. The answer, again, this is where the conversation we had at the start is so important. When you see what happens, we're a global organization, and when you see what happens, as it will at Global Forum, May 31st to June 2nd in Washington, D.C., and you should all come, and you should all come. When you see what happens when young Jewish leaders from our campuses around the world come to Washington, D.C., and you've got campus leaders, university leaders from South Africa and Australia and across Europe and across Latin America and the United States, all coming together to work together to strengthen each other and to strengthen their efforts on their campuses. That is the single best way to ensure that campuses have the leaders that they need to push back against what they're hearing from students who are not educated, who are misinformed, so often intentionally, by those seeking to undermine Israel.
Okay, and you actually answered the second question with the first, so beautiful. Earlier on this evening, you spoke about how the Jewish community has historically been, and proudly so, on the forefront of fighting against social injustice here in the United States. So the question is this: it's true Jews have been on the forefront of fighting for social causes. However, after October 7th, many of our so-called allies deserted us. How do we encourage more reciprocity?
Look, it's a really important question, and I appreciate the specific question about how do we encourage more. The question that I often get is, why do we even bother? Well, given the disappointment that we felt after October 7th and among people that we have stood with, that we expected would be there for us as we were there for them, why do we even continue? And so I appreciate the question, because I don't think there's a choice. Our community, I know I've stressed this, but I'm going to say it again, we cannot do this on our own. There are only two choices after the disappointment that we felt that in response to October 7th. There are only two choices. The first is to simply withdraw, throw up our hands, conclude that our friends aren't our friends, and we need to just withdraw into a shell and do everything on our own. Or we double down and we understand that for our community to be strong, the whole community needs to be strong. And that the relationships that we have, at AJC around the country, we have 25 offices around the United States. And from community to community, just this week there was a big dinner in Houston bringing together the Jewish community leaders and leaders from the Latino community. Our interreligious work, whether it's the work we do with the Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, or the work that we do with the Catholic Church or our Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, just to name a few, that work is critical to building these relationships. We learned a lot from October 7th, and I think the people that we count on learned a lot from how we expressed our disappointment after October 7th. That's what we have to build from so that going forward, those relationships can be stronger, and that there's an understanding that by standing together at this moment to fight anti-Semitism, we're doing something that will benefit their community and our country as well.
Yeah. We've spoken about the partisanship within the country. This writer says, more and more frequently, Jews are becoming our own worst enemies. The saying, 2 Jews, 3 opinions, is more true than ever. Yes, we absolutely must come together. What do you think of a pro-Semitism movement, and it's a beautiful idea, and how do we come together as one people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's going to be a lot easier. I think we have to acknowledge this. It's going to be a lot easier for us to go out to others outside of the Jewish community and ask them to stand with us when we show them that within the Jewish community we're actually able to stand together. And that has to be a focus. We can't think about how we all felt after October 7th. Like the understanding was so real. We understood how we really are in this together, that what happened in Israel affects all of the Jewish world, that the anti-Semitism that we've seen around the world didn't distinguish between Reform Jews, conservative Jews, Orthodox Jews. It didn't ask who you voted for. The guy who attacked the governor's mansion, the murderer from Washington, the murderer from Boulder, the guy who set the fire in Jackson, who firebombed the synagogue in Jackson, their hatred is of Jews. They don't care what kind of Jews we are. We understood that and we felt it intensely. And we have to fight really hard to not simply go back to where we were before, where we were divided. We were divided between ourselves in different camps, poking one another. We have to be able to be more unified. And I'll just finish with this. At AJC, we take this very seriously. And I get this question all the time. Oh, there are all these Jewish organizations. Why can't they work together? That is an incredibly important question. It's the reason why every single day we are looking for opportunities to collaborate with Jewish organizations from around the country and from around the world. Because when we do, we are stronger, we are in a better position to represent the Jewish community to the broader world, and we're in the strongest position to be even more impactful. Jewish unity, standing together, will help us as we seek more allies outside of the Jewish community.
So one final question for the night. With all the challenges we face today as a Jewish people, rising discomfort, if not outright fear, diminished identification with the Zionist project, as a recent JFNA survey measured, though that finding can be interpreted, I think, in a few different ways. With all of the challenges, what is it that gives you hope for the Jewish future?
First of all, thank you again for this opportunity, and thanks everyone for being here and for watching. We have, throughout our history, Jewish community has endured enormous challenges. When I was still a member of Congress, and one of my colleagues at the time, you may recall, was espousing some of the worst conspiracy theories, tropes, anti-Semitic tropes, as a member of Congress. And I tried to get Congress to condemn anti-Semitism, And as probably a lot of you remember, where we wound up was in fact a resolution that condemned anti-Semitism and literally every kind of hatred. As I recall, 3.5 pages of different kinds of hatred. And I found myself forced to go to the House floor and lecture my colleagues about what anti-Semitism has done to the Jewish community throughout our history. We have been rounded up, we've been put into ghettos, we've been chased out of countries, we came back to countries, we were chased out of countries again, expelled from countries. There's been violence waged against us, and the near annihilation, the attempted annihilation of the Jewish people, and then on October 7th, the worst, deadliest attack against us since the Holocaust. There is a positive message here, I promise. I had to explain all of that, and then also explain that in every one of those instances, throughout our history, whatever we have endured, we have come out of it stronger and more resilient and more committed to being proud, the proud Jews that we are, and we as Jews, and again, I say this as the person who's privileged to lead the American Jewish Committee. As proud Jews in America and everywhere around the world, we have made positive contributions in every community in which we have ever lived. And so, yes, a lot of this conversation has been fairly bleak, but I so appreciate this question because when you spend time with the young people that I referenced earlier, when you have the opportunity to go out and see and engage with people who are as committed to standing up as proud Jews and advocating for our people, not just with our own people, but in the broader community. And you see that despite the challenges that we face, we remain committed to continuing to make those positive contributions. That gives me great hope. This is the 250th anniversary of America. And throughout our history, Jews have continued to play a central role. And as I think about this question, I think about my father, may he rest in peace, who was a proud Jew who grew up in Chicago, graduated from high school, enlisted in the army, and then went off to fight the Nazis in the Battle of the Bulge. And when he took a piece of shrapnel through his helmet and earned a Purple Heart, he joined the ranks of so many Jews throughout history who have put their lives on the line and given their lives for the countries in which they have lived. And he taught us always, me and my siblings as we were growing up, he said, we are Jews and we are Americans, and we should always be proud of both because both depend on the other. As I think about what gives me hope, there is so much good that is being done every single day by Jews, as Jews, the Jewish community standing proudly, acting on our own behalf and for others. There is a very bright future ahead for the Jewish community and for Israel. And the good news is we have the opportunity to help shape that future in the way that we must. I am so grateful for all of you for being here. Rabbi, this anti-Semitism report, which contains so many bleak data points. At the end of the day, it gives us the opportunity to reflect on what we're able to do together. That's what I've tried to do here. I appreciate your posing these questions so that we could do this together, and I thank all of you for spending the time going through this with us.
Please join me in thanking the wonderful Ted Deutch.